All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Again, we're on a Friday afternoon on a short week, right after July 4th. So thank you all for attending. This is going to be a little more in the weeds, today's presentation, and it's really going to be focusing more on individuals who are interested in learning a little more about testing itself, and it'll certainly provide a brief overview of some of the concepts that we're covering, but hopefully you can walk away with some concrete tools here that you can use for your own digital assets. So again, my name is Johan Rempel. I'm with Center for Inclusive Design and Innovation. And today we are once again providing live captions. Per usual, there's two ways of doing this. Idella has already dropped the link in for the stream text into the chat, so you can access that through a third-party application in order to access the live transcripts, or you can click on the closed captions option on the bottom right where the bright red arrow is pointing to. Now I am sharing my full screen here just because I'm going to be demonstrating hopefully a couple of different screen readers to you today. And this is something that we couldn't have done a few years back. Zoom just didn't have the capability of making all of this run. So fingers crossed that everything's going to work well. And then please jump in with any questions you may have in the chat. I'll be monitoring that, checking that hopefully every 10 minutes or so, just to see if there's any questions at all. I prefer this to be interactive and make it as specific to your needs as possible. So you've all, if you've attended the previous trainings, you know a little bit about CIDI. We're under the College of Design at Georgia Tech. And pretty much everything we do is related to accessibility, whether it's Braille, accessibility consulting, digital accessibility, web accessibility evaluations, technical assistance and trainings such as this, captioning and described audio services, eText. You've all heard from, or some of you have probably heard from Dr. Valerie Morrison regarding the eText services we offer and how to make a document accessible. I'll be covering that today, specifically as it relates to screen meeting technology. And then our AT team. So every state in the US has an Assistive Technology Act, and we're fortunate to have the AT Act housed within CIDI. So the goals for today, provide a description of overlapping needs of people with disabilities, overview of common screen magnification applications, overview of common screen readers, and then provide a real-time demonstration, fingers crossed, of assistive technology. Hopefully nothing goes awry here. And then sharing of resources related to assistive technology. So testing for accessibility, a hybrid of automated and manual testing. There's a real movement these days to use automated testing tools, and especially for companies selling these automated testing tools, to give the impression that this is all you need. And I think by the end of today's training, you'll see that it really is a combination of the two. Even reputable companies producing these automated testing tools will acknowledge that they cover 30 to 40% of accessibility issues. There are just so many aspects that manual testing really is required. So it is always a combination. We at CIDI, we use at least half a dozen different testing tools, automated testing tools, but then we go in with an actual screen reader and manual testing and make sure that it is accessible to the largest target audience possible. So how people with disabilities use the web, there is a significant overlap here with individuals with disabilities and some of their needs related to digital content. And it's worth mentioning some of these. It can be a very daunting task initially, thinking of making everything accessible for a wide variety of people with disabilities. But by the end of today, hopefully it'll be a little more clear on some of the aspects, some of the low-hanging fruit, if you want to call it that, that makes accessibility much easier, or easier to tackle, less daunting to tackle. So visual, this category can really represent a few different areas. Visual, the most obvious one, and even with the picture here depicted on the bottom right, is someone who's blind, right? So someone who's blind can't access the screen visually, can't access digital content visually. So that's where the screen reading technology really comes in. Another area here is people who are colorblind or individuals with low vision. And individuals with low vision, there's a real crossover there between low vision solutions and solutions specific to individuals who are blind. For example, a lot of the screen magnification applications also have some level of speech output. So I've worked with many people who have had vision loss who initially are low vision users, and then they're transitioning into speech users, either because their vision changed or because they realized with their low vision, it just wasn't feasible. It wasn't functional for them to continue to exhaust themselves trying to access content visually. Auditory, we think immediately of someone who may not be able to hear, deaf or hard of hearing. So one example of that with accommodations we provide here is the captions. Captions can I'm sorry, let me back up. So the captions themselves are very beneficial for individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing, but they also serve really a much wider population. So a lot of people benefit from those captions, but if a person's in a noisy environment, certainly the captions could be beneficial as well. Mobility. So y'all have probably heard the name of Stephen Hawkins, who passed away a few years ago. He operated a computer relatively effectively with simply using a muscle on his cheek. Because of his degenerative condition near the end of his life, that was one of the only muscles that he had control over. And so he actually used a device that rides on top of the keyboard for controlling the keyboard that way. So that is on one end of the spectrum. Certainly someone with limited mobility, maybe the use of only one hand or partial use of both hands. So it really is a wide range of individuals in the category of mobility. Cognitive and neurological, today's society is slowly becoming more and more aware of some of these needs. Dyslexia is a perfect example. I've lost track of how many people I've spoken to who grew up in the school system 25, 35 years ago, and they weren't diagnosed with dyslexia. They were just diagnosed as maybe being slow, being challenged in different areas. And when these accommodations are met, when the tools are incorporated, dyslexia does not have to hold a person back. So society is becoming more and more aware of these needs, cognitive and neurological. This could also mean older adults who may have memories that aren't as sharp as they used to be, and that will likely happen to most of us if we live long enough. It could be someone who experienced a stroke previously. So just a wide range of challenges in these areas. And then speech, most of us use this every single day when we talk to our Alexa, I won't say the name, or our Google Home, etc. So much of what we do today is speech activated, even using speech to text. But what happens if a person has difficulties articulating? What happens? Another example would be someone who has a really heavy, thick accent, who may not have, been born with English as their first language. So a wide spectrum of needs here related to accessing digital content. I'm just checking the chat. I don't see any questions, but again, please feel free. And Christy, thank you. Happy Friday to you too. I'm sure you'll all be much happier when this is over. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about some applications that are text-to-speech readers, and these are not full-blown screen readers. A lot of people mix these up. A program like Claro Read, this is really designed for someone who has a cognitive or learning disability who benefits from that speech output. And just to make clear that this would not necessarily be the most effective application for testing. An example is the menu bar that we see up here. And honestly, it's too small for me to read. It's very, very small print. But a screen reader probably would not articulate the buttons effectively. They likely are not labeled effectively. And then even the details of submenus and those sorts of aspects, very often those are not even readily available for someone who's blind. So a lot of people mix these up, these text-to-speech programs, with full-blown screen readers. Screen readers really are much more robust. And the goal of a screen reader is to speak every aspect of the screen, whether it's the content or the application, so that someone who's blind can read, can understand what's on the screen, whereas these text-to-speech programs do not. They do provide text-to-speech, visual highlighting. They read back any on-screen text and program commands, high-quality screen reader. They call it a screen reader here. This is their own terminology, but again, just be careful about not interpreting this as a full-blown screen reader like JAWS or NVDA, which we'll be getting into. Keyboard echo and then save to audio. And here's another one that's very often used for by individuals who do not have a visual impairment but have a cognitive or learning disability. Read and Write Gold. This also provides text-to-speech, reads Word, PDF files, and web pages as long as they're accessible. Text highlighting allows for creation of audio version and provides customizable toolbars. Now, I mentioned a couple times now how these are not full-blown screen readers, but keep in mind this second bullet point reads Word, PDF files, and web pages as long as they're accessible. So when you do create accessible content, you're making it accessible for someone who's blind or low vision, but also for someone who has dyslexia or another learning disability, who is using one of these tools, they may very well have 20/20 vision, but if they're accessing a document or a site that's not accessible, their text-to-speech is not going to work either. So even though we focus a lot on individuals who are blind, that transfers directly over to individuals with cognitive and learning disabilities. So here's a number of screen magnification programs. I have used all of these, and on a daily basis, I use the Windows Magnifier. That's built into the Windows operating system. But then there's also third-party applications like Magic and ZoomText that are very, very powerful, but also are a hog for memory and sometimes can be pretty cost prohibitive for individuals. the reason I'm bringing this up is because it's really about the end user's experience. And you know, generally speaking, things are left justified, um, or in familiar areas that people recognize, moving from left to right, top to bottom. But for designing material, for editing material, just keep that in mind, that that flow might be challenging for someone with who's using screen magnification when it doesn't conform to the typical top to bottom, left to right sort of format. The Mac Zoom, this is the only Zoom magnification application that's available for the Mac. It's built into the Mac, the Apple operating system. Again, it's a fairly powerful Zoom magnification program, but not nearly as powerful as Magic or Zoom Text. And then Zoom and Magnifier, you all have access to this on your smartphones, whether it's the iOS platform or Android. Again, this is something I personally use every single day, and I've lost track of how many friends of mine with presbyopia. That's where people start needing reading glasses at the age of between 40 and 50 and into their 50s. With presbyopia, how valuable these magnification programs can be. Okay, and commonly used screen readers. So you've probably heard of these. You've probably heard us speak briefly about these. There really are three most commonly used screen readers. There are more than these, but they take up a very small percentage of the market share of screen reader users. The first is JAWS, Job Access with Speech. It has been around for a long time, upwards of 25, I think it's close to 30 years now it's been out. It's always been a paid screen reader. It's come down in cost considerably, especially for students and higher ed institutions, but it is still a very expensive screen reader for some people. It can run upwards of $1,000 depending on a person's situation and status as a student or being employed. Now they do offer an annual subscription of, I believe it's $95, but that needs to be renewed continually. That being said, JAWS is still the most commonly used screen reader. With all that money that it costs, they have been able to provide a lot of technical support and scripts and macros. So when you're looking at the latest version of Office that comes out, for instance, usually those scripts are ready to go. NVDA stands for Non-Visual Desktop Access. This is a free screen reader. Anybody can download it. They do ask for a donation, but you don't have to provide a donation to them without having access to it. I like testing with NVDA as well, because it's not as powerful as JAWS, and JAWS has a lot of AI built into it, that it does a bit of a guessing game. And for example, not labeling forms correctly. JAWS typically does a good job, but sometimes it fails. And what NVDA does is, even though it's a free screen reader and it's not nearly as powerful, it will not automatically try to guess the labels of form fields, for instance. And you can more readily detect if a form field is not effectively labeled. VoiceOver for the Mac, that's built into the Mac. Again, the only screen reader application that's available on the Mac. Apple loves to keep things within their own ecosystem. It's hard to break into that. But I would say of this order, this is the order that they are used most commonly: JAWS, NVDA, and then VoiceOver for the Mac. And VoiceOver trails considerably I would say for any sort of academic or professional environment, NVDA and Voice over the Mac really don't quite cut it. There's just too many applications out there, too many changes, and JAWS does a pretty good job of keeping up. That's why people are willing to pay for that application. I'm checking the chat. I don't see any questions at all, but feel free to just post any that you have. Now, I mentioned earlier about some of the applications riding on top of the keyboard interface. This is certainly one of them, speech recognition software. This wasn't designed for individuals with disabilities. This was originally designed for executives who either didn't want to type or didn't know how to type, and they could actually do dictation. And this is a pretty robust application. It works really well, especially for individuals who may have mobility limitations and want to dictate. A colleague of mine uses this every single day and wouldn't be able to do a lot of her work without this. But once again, a lot of this rides on top of the keyboard user interface. It certainly has other aspects to that, but once you make an application accessible via the keyboard, programs like Dragon Naturally Speaking will work even better on them. So you might be recognizing how I'm tying different disabilities into the benefits of making content and applications and websites accessible for screen readers. It really does benefit almost everybody. So now I'm going to give a live demonstration, hopefully fingers crossed that this all works nicely, of document accessibility. So give me a moment here, and I'm going to need to just move things around here a bit. Okay, I'm going to ask for some assistance here.
Full speech.
I'm going to make sure.
Escape, escape, escape.
I hit escape 3 times. If someone can just put in the chat if you heard escape 3 times from the screen reader, and if you're seeing the Beatles document displayed on the screen. If you can just let me know in the chat, that'd be great.
Alert from Bernard. Menu chat to move through escape.
Excellent, thank you.
Alert.
All right, we're good to go. So I have JAWS.
Alert from Audrey Price.
Okay. So thank you. What's happening here?
Alert
this is actually
from Alice Prendergast to everyone. I heard and.
Yep. So what's happening here, and this is a really good example of how the cognitive load of a screen reader can be a little bit overwhelming. Every time someone, once I enabled the speech of JAWS, every time someone typed in chat and posted that, JAWS would read that. And it can be beneficial, but it also can be tremendously distracting as well. So just consider that with a cognitive load that someone who's blind is working with. You know, that old cliche, picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, it turns into 1,000 words with JAWS when someone is trying to access this much content. So let me get into this document here. This is a pretty straightforward document. It's got some different types of fonts. It's got different size text and colors. And the question is often asked regarding what a screen reader user can access with font. By default, again, because it's information overload, a screen reader doesn't automatically indicate the color, the background color. It doesn't indicate the font that's being used. So in this aspect, let's just go to the top of the page.
Top of file, the Beatles - inaccessible document, left bracket compact.
Okay, this is an inaccessible document. And
leaving menus. Top of file, history, the Beatles.
Okay, the Beatles. So you just heard it say the Beatles. It didn't say anything about the purple color. So in some aspects, a screen reader actually makes this more accessible than someone just visually trying to see this, because if I keep going down here,
blank became one of the most commercially successful and critically acclaimed acts in.
Okay, it didn't tell me the font was red. It didn't tell me that it was a very fancy font that is for me almost unidentifiable, some of the letters. JAWS actually reads that really nicely. So this is an example of where someone who is low vision or colorblind may actually have greater difficulties than a screen reader user.
Top of 5.
So as per usual, this is a color contrast fail. This would not meet WCAG, so that purple in the background would be very difficult for a large number of people to see. And then we actually do not have
Quick keys on.
we actually do not have any headings on this page.
No more headings found.
Okay. When these are coded as headings, for example, history, the Beatles, it allows someone with using a screen reader to very quickly navigate through these and jump through them. But I would have to go through this kind of like with a fine-tooth comb otherwise. And then if you sat in on the document accessibility presentations that Valerie Morrison gave, let's just highlight some of what she
The
covered
Beatles.
here.
History.
Now I'm going to go down arrow to the first paragraph and listen to what it says here.
Blank. Blank. Blank.
So we're hearing blank, blank, blank. We know that the Beatles is just a few spaces down because we can see it. But for a screen reader user, someone who's blind, they have no idea. Is it 3 arrows down? Is it 40? So this is where, as much as possible, you want to use proper spacing versus the enter key to create those blank spaces, because that's really going to be challenging and potentially confusing for somebody. Now these graphics, none of them are labeled.
Picture.
It simply says picture.
Page 2, picture.
Picture.
Page 4, picture.
Page 4, picture.
Page 1, picture.
So it scrolls back to the top.
Top of 5.
This is exactly what someone who's blind would experience. They would have no idea what these pictures actually represent. So a lot of this transfers over to the internet as well. Some of these accessibility issues that I'm pointing out. And then by default,
The Beatles, page 1.
Okay, we have page 1 actually written out here.
The Beatles, page 1.
But if this was part of the header or footer, a screen reader user would not be able to access that. So keep that in mind too. If you have documents that have critical information in their header or footer, make sure that that's available somewhere else as well on the document, because a screen reader user, although technically they can eventually access that, there's going to be no indication that there's any information in the header or footer or how important that is. So just some aspects to keep in mind. And I'm just going to check the chat here real quickly.
Menu.
Okay.
Escape.
All right. I'm not seeing any questions so far. Now, let's switch to PowerPoint.
Task switching. The Beatles - inaccessible document left bracket compatibility mode right bracket dash script screen creating accessible word create.
Okay, so this is a PowerPoint that you should have all received already. This is a presentation that Valerie Morrison provided on creating accessible PowerPoints, and this is an example of how someone who's blind could access an accessible PowerPoint. Right now I'm in the thumbnail. I could just press the F6 key.
F7.
Oh, I made a mistake. This is where someone who's blind absolutely needs really good keyboard skills, because at a slight pressing F7 versus F6, you see how that threw me off completely. Let's see here. Where was I? This one. Okay. So I'm going to press F6. Hopefully I get it right this time.
F7.
Oh my goodness. All right. It's a Friday afternoon. Give me 1 second here.
Object placeholder level 1. 2 options call.
Okay. Sorry about that. All right. This is what I want. Okay.
F6. Slide area. No selection. To select an object, press tab.
So it said slide area. It went from thumbnail to slide area. Now I can tab.
Title placeholder level 1. Adding accessible heading.
So it told me title. Now I can tab again.
Object placeholder level 1. Bullet, highlight a word or line in your document and select the heading level in the styles group on the home ribbon.
Okay. And then I simply tab and it reads that portion of text to me. I tab again.
Picture the heading styles available on the Microsoft Word home ribbon.
Okay. And then it goes to the ribbon. So it's sometimes a judgment call if you want to have the text before the image. Usually that's the case. The text is the information that's being read first, and then the image is almost secondary. Valerie Morrison chose to make this image last. What I in tab order, what I do want to show you here is how sensitive a screen reader is. I'm going to drag this over and just lower it. Now, if I tab through,
title placeholder level 1. Object placeholder level 1. Bullet highlight.
Okay, I'm going to tab again and then just listen carefully to what this says.
Picture the heading styles available on the Microsoft Word home ribbon. Picture overlaps top edge of object placeholder.
Picture overlaps top level of object placeholder. So even something as simple as this that we take for granted, Valerie Morrison very intentionally placed this up here. But once it overlaps, it's not that it makes it necessarily inaccessible. It's that the verbiage that JAWS puts out is so much more. And for someone who really cares that that's overlapping slightly, that's great. But if you design it in such a way that it's not overlapping, it just makes it so much easier and smoother for a screen reader user. And as you could hear, it automatically reads the alt text of this image as well. So pretty straightforward. Okay, and I'm just going to read Christy's comment here. Okay, Johan, are you able to set the speed for JAWS? The software seems to be reading very quickly, but I know I am not as familiar with the voice.
Escape.
Absolutely, thank you. You're right. I use this on a regular basis, and it's probably reading a little too quickly. So let me show you how I would do this.
Leaving menus, JAWS Professional.
Okay, I'm going to go to JAWS. I'm going to go to Options.
Menu, Voices submenu.
Going to go to Voices.
Voice adjustment, V, enter, leaving menus.
Voice adjustment, and then I can tab to the rate.
Voice, rate :69, left, right slider.
Okay. And then I'm going to slow it down slightly.
24%, 23, 20 to 21 per 20%.
Is that better? Let's try 20% and see if that works for everybody.
Voice up. Okay, enter. JAWS Professional.
Okay, hopefully that slows it down. I apologize for racing through this. Most screen reader users use it so quickly that an average person can't understand a word. And I've slowed it down considerably, but once again, if you don't have access to this and aren't exposed to it on a regular basis, it can be very quick. So hopefully that makes it a little easier. Now, so all of the basic elements here are included. This title is coded as properly coded as a heading. The graphics are labeled. It's in essentially correct tab order, although Valerie Morrison decided to put this in the last tab, order, which is completely fine. I'm going to now go to the same document saved as a PDF.
JAWS Professional to move meeting to the Beatles - inaccessible document left screen reader overview.pdf - Adobe Acrobat Pro.
Oh, actually, I lied. I'm going to do another one. This one's up already. This is the same PowerPoint I'm presenting on, but the concepts are the same. So now with a PowerPoint, an accessible PowerPoint that's saved as a PDF, everything flows here. If I want to access all of the headings, for instance,
document heading list dialog headings list view.
Every slide is listed as an H1.
Testing how people clear read screen commonly used.
Okay.
Escape.
If I want to list all of the graphics on this,
select the graphic dialog. List one list.
Every single graphic can be pulled up very quickly through a dialog box.
Escape.
If I want to go through the headings, heading by heading.
Goals for today. Goal for
I can simply press the H key as well.
testing for access.
So you see
Testing.
the level
Escape.
of flexibility here that's available when this is coded correctly. The cognitive and auditory fatigue and learning curve is so high that when you build this level of accessibility, and it just gives a person with a disability so much more flexibility in navigating what could be very exhaustive material otherwise. Any questions about that? Give people a moment. And don't hesitate to type in the chat, even though JAWS is going to chatter. Please just type in any questions you may have. Okay, so go ahead, let me go ahead and close that.
Alt F4.
Okay, and then I can
Add.
close this one here.
Alt F4. Microsoft Power. N. Nothing select.
Okay, and I'm going to close this one.
Alt F4.
Just so I have fewer things open. Okay, now I'm going to continue on. It's going
Alert
to.
From.
Okay, let me check the chat.
Menu.
Okay, so Christy says, confirming what I think you said, Adobe maintains all of the functions entered in Microsoft. Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, if you do a save from PowerPoint to PDF, it should convert it very cleanly, and that's something we do on a regular basis. There could be other aspects that a person chooses to incorporate, but the vast majority of the accessibility when you convert PowerPoint to PDF is going to be accessible. There are some oddities. For example, a heading in as a PDF in Adobe PDF, they label them as bookmarks. So if you actually look for in the preview, the tree, the developer tree, you're actually going to see them labeled as bookmarks instead of headings. But just as you saw, for all intents and purposes, it functions just like headings within a PowerPoint or Word document.
Escape meeting.
Good question, though. And these are two different companies as well, so it's understandable that they would label things a little bit differently.
Leaving menus. Ready. Red. Where do I start? Slide.
Okay, and I'm going to stay in thumbnail because I'm going to be jumping back into demo mode in a moment, and it'll just make it a little bit easier. So it's intentional that you're seeing the thumbnails on the left. So where do I start? It's a wide array of assistive technology products. It's very easy to get overwhelmed on the different versions, the different applications. And then lack of experience using assistive technology. Thank you, Christy, for bringing that to light, that I was actually running JAWS a little bit quickly. For some people, that speed is too much. And then I did a presentation yesterday where I had that same speed, and the two people I was presenting to had a little more exposure to screen reading technology, and they actually asked me to speed it up. So, and then also there's so many browsers and operating systems and devices. WCAG, as you've probably heard, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, really aims at making material and content device agnostic. So in a perfect world, it shouldn't matter which device you're using, which operating system you're using, which browser you're using. It really should be compatible across the board. So that's really the goal.
Step away.
So if there's nothing else you learn from this presentation, I would say this is probably the most important slide when it comes to manual testing. Chances are some of you are not going to be experts in screen reading technology. It is a steep learning curve, but this is something that you can do, is step away from the mouse and start testing just with the keyboard alone, even if you aren't running a full-blown screen reader like I am now. Keyboard accessibility covers a multitude of sins. So once a site or application is keyboard accessible, it really makes it much more accessible for everybody. And then you'll likely be accessing the screen visually, but if you're tabbing through an application or a website and you're not seeing where the focus is, that is going to impact so many other people who can't use a mouse, who can't just point and click like we all do. It's going to ride on top of the user interface of the text-to-speech programs that I demonstrated. It's going to benefit programs like Dragon Naturally Speaking. And then it's going to help you to determine the reading order. If you do see the visible focus, is it effectively moving from left to right, top to bottom on the screen, or is it jumping around a lot? Or are you experiencing a keyboard trap where you're tabbing and tabbing and tabbing and you can't get out of a certain frame or a certain aspect of the page? And then visual focus, obviously you're going to very quickly determine whether it has visual focus. Either you're going to be able to see it or you can't. Interactive form controls, using the tab key and the arrow keys essentially are ways in which someone who's blind explores the page, right? We explore the page visually. We can, in a fraction of a second, capture all that information on a page and determine, what's on the menu, how many graphics are there, what's the subject line. Not being able to use the tab key and arrow keys without activating something or accessing the different aspects of the page is really going to be problematic. And that blends right into the keyboard triggered event handlers. You really shouldn't be, your site or application shouldn't be triggering anything if you're simply tabbing through it or arrowing through. So like I said, if you learn nothing more from this presentation than this, just simply using your keyboard and using the tab and the arrow keys to navigate through a page, that's going to tell you a lot about its accessibility or lack thereof.
Why test with screen readers?
Okay, why test with screen readers? So as Valerie Morrison and I have, I believe, mentioned in the past, the population with visual impairments and blindness is not the largest population. It really is individuals with cognitive and learning disabilities. So critical stops abound for inaccessible sites. When you test with a screen reader, you're really testing at a higher, you're raising the bar actually, because for someone who's blind, it's not a choice of, boy, this is really difficult, but I can access it. Sometimes it's an aspect of just hitting a brick wall. So critical stops with various aspects. Whereas someone with a cognitive or learning disability, and honestly, someone even with low vision could get by, maybe get their magnifier out, maybe use a built-in screen magnifier and sort of eke their way through a hurdle or a challenge. Accessible for screen readers equals accessibility for many, which we've emphasized using other assistive technology solutions. And then liability and powerful advocacy groups. The National Federation of the Blind is not shy about filing lawsuits. So you name it, Target, they've sued Target, I believe, TurboTax, the list goes on and on, where the NFB actually retains a full-time attorney, and this is their way of making an impact of filing lawsuits and making organizations have their content to be more accessible. One of the questions that I get most often is, what do we need to do to be ADA compliant? What do we need to do to lower our legal risk? And unfortunately, the lawsuits get a lot of traction and motivate people to make those changes versus making those changes because it's in the best interest of everyone and because it reaches a larger target audience. And quite honestly makes material accessible for everybody, regardless of whether they have a disability or not.
NVDA:pro.
Okay, so the pros and cons, let's start with NVDA. So as I mentioned, the pros are that it's free, and I'm going to give you some resources here in this PowerPoint on how you can download this and certainly use this for your own testing. It's lightweight, which means that it uses few system resources. JAWS is actually a bit of a hog for memory. That's why I'm keeping my fingers crossed, because I'm running JAWS and it takes a lot of system resources, whereas NVDA is much more versatile and lighter. Frequent updates, they update these quarterly. There's no cost to these updates. They just push them out. The cons to NVDA are there's a lack of technical support. With JAWS, I have a number on my mobile phone. I can call them. I know I'm going to get really good service. Whereas NVDA, you can access online resources, but there's no customer support number to call, in part because it's an open source application. So you have people by the community building for people in the community versus a for-profit model like JAWS. There's lack of compatibility with third-party applications. It's less frequently used in education and workplace than paid screen readers, and the poor quality synthesizer by default. And I'll go into how you can actually change that. The synthesizer isn't as good quality as JAWS, but it's not bad.
JAWS:/Pro.
Now, the pros of JAWS are that it still has the vast majority of the market share. It's upwards of, I believe, still 70 to 80%. As I mentioned, it's got excellent technical support, extensive scripts developed for third-party applications. The cons are that it is expensive. It tries to fill in accessibility gaps, like I mentioned earlier, and sometimes it gets it wrong. And there's lack of portability and versatility with the installation. It's breaking into JAWS without an official license is like trying to break into Fort Knox. It's not going to happen. They guard that as precious gold. So even with technical assistance, you have to give the authorization number and go through that whole thing.
Web accessibility.
Okay, now I'm going to attempt to provide a demonstration of a website. I've done this very briefly the other day. I'm going to go into a little more detail today.
Meeting controls. JAWS 7 accessible university demo site inaccessible.
Okay, so I'm using a fictitious, and just going to read the comment here.
Menu chat.
Is JAWS typically available in public libraries? Boy, that's a good question. I think it varies from library to library. If you have advocates in a library who know anything about assistive technology, they should be advocating for JAWS, because NVDA just doesn't cut it. You know, just like any state or city budgets, they're limited. So you will likely run into libraries that have NVDA loaded in them, the free version, but it doesn't quite cut it. You know, give people what they need. If JAWS is the dominant screen reader, you know, it's a lack of access if you're just loading NVDA and you expect someone to jump on there and be able to access everything. So I think it's a depends question, depending on the funding and the particular library and the person overseeing the digital assets thereof. Excellent question. As you can tell, I'm a strong advocate for giving people with disabilities what they need. So this is a fictitious website. It's got an accessible and inaccessible version. We're on the inaccessible version, and hopefully I'll demonstrate to you why it's really important to do some manual testing. And even if you yourself do not do this manual testing, run this through someone who is using assistive technology, and you will get some really good feedback. So let's start with the menus here.
Accessible.
I'm going to tab through this.
About link.
Okay, it simply says about link,
Academics link.
academics link.
Admissions link.
It's very easy to forget how much information we gather visually. So we know this is a menu, but a person who's blind just accessing this via a link does not know this is an actual menu. I'm going to pull up all the links on this page.
Links list dialog. Links list.
And look at how we've got a whole list of links all over this page.
Home. About. One of.
But about just blends into everything else. A person wouldn't know that there's a hierarchical structure with that being a menu. Since I'm in this list of links,
Click here.
let's go down to click here. And this is a good demonstration of how ineffective click here really is when you're using that as an anchor or a link to something else. Visually, contextually, someone can make sense of that really quickly. But as you can hear, not only are they non-contextual, they're duplicate.
Click here. 7. Click here. 8 of 11.
Okay, 3 click here's a person who's blind would have no idea if they're accessing this through a list box, which ones those actually point to.
Escape. Admission.
And then visually on the screen, let's see where it is here. Oh, it's hard to see. There are click here links somewhere. Oh, it just faded in. So yeah, here's a click here. Here's a click here. So yeah, contextually with the text surrounding it, a person can technically figure out what that is. But for someone that's blind, that's looking for a needle in a haystack. This page, I don't believe has any headings.
There are no headings on this page.
Absolutely no headings. So a person, once again, needle in a haystack concept. We have the privilege of looking at this with welcome, and then the Spanish word, which I'm not even going to try to pronounce, I'll butcher it. Can you spot the barriers? Someone who's blind has no idea that these are actually standing out as headings. And then if I continue tabbing.
About link, academic, admission, visitors link.
And if I tab through this carousel here, listen carefully.
Events link, accessible university demo site inaccessible version.
Okay, and I tab again.
AU student wins engineering award for talking robot sign language interpreter link.
Okay, it goes to the text. If I tab again.
Click here link.
It simply says click here link. So these left and right arrows are not
Images.
Accessible for someone who's using a keyboard. Forget someone who's blind, just using a keyboard, these are not accessible. So very challenging. I'm going to continue tabbing and I'm going to go to these forms here.
Click here link, click here link, click here link, name.
Okay, so, and I'm sorry, I'm going fairly quickly. Let me back up once.
Click here. Name, edit, type in text.
Name, edit, type in text. So it completely bypassed this critical information that says required fields are in blue. Fortunately, we don't see this kind of color coding very often, but sometimes we do run into it. Honestly, with my visual impairment, I can't see the black from blue here. So that would be very challenging, but it really should, these should be labeled accordingly. So the blue is required.
Email edit, type in text.
Okay, it doesn't say in the email edit that that's required.
City edit.
Okay, and I can tab through these. This is where those labels are so important, and that's in the HTML code that's fairly easy to code. Now, if I continue tabbing down.
Country engineering checkbox not checked. To check, press space.
Okay, so I went from country to engineering, and let's tab now.
Economics checkbox not checked. To check, press space bar.
Okay, to press check, press space bar.
Space checked.
So it said economics. This is where it's absolutely critical to make sure that the forms are in alignment and properly labeled with what they represent. As I mentioned earlier, JAWS sometimes will guess different form fields, and I've seen where JAWS actually gets it wrong. where it guessed the one before, and the person I was working with, who is completely blind, had no idea that they just checked the wrong box. So very problematic. And if we continue on down here, this is a bane of my existence and many other people's, the CAPTCHA here. Please enter the 2 words you see below, separated by a space. So for anyone with a learning disability, dyslexia, low vision, blind, these are really, really challenging to complete. All right, so let's go. I'm just doing a time check here. We're at 3 o'clock already.
Economics.
Okay, so let's go to the accessible site, and let me show you how quickly I can access the headings.
Accessible University heading level 1 graph.
Heading level 1.
Featured story slideshow heading level 2.
Featured show slide story.
Welcome heading level.
Welcome.
Bienvenido heading level 2.
Okay.
Can you spot the?
So you see the ease at which I can zip through this when the headings are actually labeled correctly. And then this is an example of where the language attribute is really helpful. If you have a page with partial Spanish, partial English, you need to make sure that it's coded correctly, because the screen reader is just going to butcher that if it's not coded as Spanish. It's going to try to articulate it as English, and it's just going to sound horrific. Due to time, I was going to go into the tables, and I'll tell you what, I'll do this very briefly.
Table with 13 columns and 5 rows. AU enroll.
Okay, so I press silence there. It actually is going to give a description of the table. And a person, again, this is a needle in a haystack. If this table is not coded correctly, where it voices the columns and rows, it's nearly impossible for someone who's blind to navigate this table successfully. That's especially important maybe with health-related data that's captured in a table, just to make sure that that is coded correctly with the columns and rows. Okay, let me switch back here.
JAWS Professional to move. Meet 7. Zoom 7. Screen reader over.
Okay. And
Browsing.
Regarding browsing, the different browsers used, JAWS and NVDA work fairly well these days with Windows Edge, Firefox, and Chrome. Those happen to also be the most commonly used browsers. When you're testing with VoiceOver, if you are testing with VoiceOver, no pun intended, but I would keep apples to apples and stick with Safari, which is Apple's own web browser. If you are testing with VoiceOver, you want to stay away from Firefox or Chrome, for example, with VoiceOver. You're going to have some really mixed results with that.
Changing NVDA.
And then, so you're going to be receiving some resources at the end here on how to download NVDA. The first thing I would do, and I appreciate Christy bringing this to my attention, JAWS was speaking too quickly. You want to make sure you're selecting, excuse me, you're selecting a synthesizer, excuse me, that's comfortable for you, that you can understand, that the speed and the sound is manageable for you. So the first thing you do is go in and make sure that you're selecting a voice type and synthesizer that works well. I happen to like the Microsoft Speech API version 5. That seems to work really well. But to make these changes, you go to the preferences within NVDA, then you go to settings, and then under settings, you go to speech, and then you can access the specific speech API, and you can then select the different voices, a female voice or a male voice. So again, you'll be getting a copy of this whole PowerPoint. If you need to refer back to this, feel free.
NVDA.
And I've tried to consolidate some of the shortcut keys here. There's literally hundreds of shortcut keys with both NVDA and JAWS. And I feel for the people who are learning JAWS and NVDA for the first time, because it's trying to decipher the forest from the trees. and what's important and what's not. And I've listed here some of the most critical keystrokes and shortcut keys specifically for accessibility testing. So up arrow, down arrow moves you line by line programmatically. Simply pressing the H and Shift H will cycle through the headings. Tab and Shift Tab will move you forward by element and back by element. Enter or spacebar will activate a link or button. The D or D plus Shift will cycle through the landmarks if the page has effectively incorporated landmarks. And then the most critical key, because you're gonna lose your mind once you start using JAWS and NVDA and you're not used to it, you want to hit the control key to silence it. That auditory overload happens really quickly, especially for introverts like me. So I get tired really quickly when JAWS or NVDA is just nattering at me, and I just want the essential information.
JAWS shortcut.
And then very similar to JAWS, I won't go through these individually, but very, very similar to NVDA. You got the down, up arrow, H plus Shift, Tab plus Shift, enter or spacebar to activate a button, Control to silence it again, and then for landmarks, it's R on this one instead of the NVDA use of it. And then forms mode on for enter, and forms mode off is escape.
Resources.
And then I've got some resources here. If you want to download NVDA, here's the link. It's pretty straightforward. nvaaccess.org, and then you can select to download.
No selection. To select an object, press.
And then the American Foundation for the Blind, it's been around for a few years. They put out a tutorial on NVDA that may be helpful. It's the initial setup of NVDA. And then JAWS also has a really robust tutorial called Surfs Up. And if you're going to be using JAWS for testing, I would strongly recommend that. And then you can download JAWS as a demo. I believe it runs for 40 minutes, and then you have to reboot your whole system. And then for yourself and colleagues, just to as a brief overview, again, I'm highlighting the perspective videos from W3C Way. Those are 2 to 3 minute videos that really emphasize why assistive technology is important for various populations and how a good accessibility and inclusive design benefits everybody. I know I went through that quickly. Hopefully this was helpful for you.
Question.
And I will open it up to questions. And you're all welcome to reach out to me separately if you do have questions. I'm going to silence JAWS here.
Space. Speech on demand.
There we go. If you don't have questions right now, certainly through Christy, you could direct questions to me if you have any. Any thoughts or comments then, if you don't have questions? Was this helpful, and are there other aspects of manual testing and screen readers I could have covered that could have been more helpful to you? Or was this just completely overwhelming? All right, Christy says this is a helpful overview and the live testing was insightful. Okay, thank you, Christy. Appreciate that. Once again, as I mentioned early on, you can run the automated testing tools, you can do the code inspection, you can go through WCAG, but really, if you want to ensure accessibility, use individuals who access assistive technology on a regular basis to at least run your some of your material through them and see if they have any issues accessing it. And even better yet, start using the assistive technology yourself. And as you're designing or developing content and the CMS, testing that in iterations so that you're not going down rabbit hole and have to reformat or redesign something that is inaccessible. And I see another comment here. Alice says, very helpful. I didn't have a lot of exposure previously, so this was a great introduction. All right, excellent. Thank you, Alice. I appreciate that. All right, well, I'll give people a few more seconds for any additional questions or comments, but if there are none, then we'll go ahead and close it out here. And in 2 weeks, not next Friday, but the Friday after, we're going to be providing a training on social media accessibility. So, whether that's Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok, making sure that social media posts are as accessible as possible. So hopefully you can all join us for that in 2 weeks at the same time. And with that, I'll thank Idella, our captionist, for all of her work captioning this. And thank you all for attending. And I see Audrey's says, looking forward to this social media accessibility training. Thank you. Thank you, Audrey. Appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your time, or your rest of your day, and I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. With that, we'll go ahead and close it out. Thank you.